This is WOMMLP operating out of Burlington, Vermont, 105.9 The Radiator. Good evening, it's the RocketShop. I am back from my COVID scare, and your host Tom Proxer, and with me tonight is Jason Baker. Hello.
Hello, Tom. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, welcome back into the studio.
Yeah, it's been a long time, for sure, to be able to even gather like this. And thanks to everyone for here for social distancing and all that.
Yeah, well, very glad to have you in. As you know, we usually like to start with the song, so what have you got for us?
Okay, I have a song that was the first song. This past year, I managed to write and record a solo album. I call it the Lighthouse. I also was able to record an album with my mentor Rick Polari of folk music, strictly folk and public domain songs. Yeah, about a year ago, we were all locked down, and I embarked on a bunch of new songs. And the first thing that came out was this song. It's called "Everybody Has a Name." There's a sickness in the air, people dying everywhere, while the leaders played a waiting game. Everybody has a name. Everybody has a name. The plague is gone, the whole world around. 1 million people dead in the ground. Hear the pastor, fuel to the flames. Everybody has a name. Everybody has a name. There's gonna be a reckoning day. Let the chips fall where they may. All the people know who to blame. Everybody has a name. Everybody has a name.
Jason Baker there with "Everybody Has a Name." So obviously some big COVID has shaped the way that you've created this album. So do you want to tell me a little bit more about that and the album that you created with Lighthouse?
Okay, so obviously the first thing coming out was that reaction to the whole situation, and I wrote a bunch of other things talking about the different ways that people reacted over the years. Some of it, let's face it, some of it's been very challenging for people. And I tried to go deeper in a couple songs into one element or another. There's a song inspired by stuff and then there's the stuff that came around because people were talking about it. There was a quote from Sonia Renee Taylor, I can't pronounce the name correctly, that went around about, we don't really want to return to normal because normal had all these problems with it. And in there was the phrase "normal never was." So I wrote a song, that phrase hit me, and I wrote a song about that. There was the reports that when things were calmed down for a month or two, that you could suddenly see the pollution cleared up. And so the notion that you could see across to the mountains, see across to the seas, led me to the thoughts of maybe there's more, things that opportunities here. So I wrote the first song on the album is called When the World Shut Down. So it's about that. And so I shot these songs as I was writing them, and there's others too. Like everybody else, I wrote a COVID blues song. But I shopped them around to other songwriters, and there were 4 folks who really supported me and wrote back. One of them was my mentor, Rick Polari, who I do a radio show with called Folk Talk, and I did an album with this past year of folk songs. And then Guy Henderson, who was another mentor of mine, and then a friend of mine who appeared on the album, Patty Shannon. She's a local musician and a CMA award-winning songwriter, and she not only gave me feedback, but was like, "Hey, I want to sing backup on these songs." So she's on the album. We did a masked, recording session at her house, and so we were able to I was able to get feedback from all those people. And then there's the last fellow that really gave me feedback was a guy named Tom Smith from New Hampshire. And he's a longtime topical songwriter, very well respected. And I was stunned that, I met him and knew him, but I was really stunned that he took the time because he's a busy guy, I'm sure, but he took the time and listened right away and gave me feedback. And so as he's like, I like this and I like this. This one was okay. And then and the last thing he wrote was, "So are you going to write any uplifting material for this album?" So that was, I finally realized I need to, we can't just wallow in our things. So I did need to come up. So the album is structured in such a way that the heavy, deep, and real stuff is is the first tracks you hear. That song's number 2. All the stuff that discusses the heavy thought processes of what is it we're going through, and what are the possible solutions and that sort of thing. Whereas the album takes a turn about halfway through. I add in a traditional song, the St. James Infirmary Blues, which is about losing someone in a hospital without getting to say goodbye. So I thought it was, and I did an arrangement that I used. Guy Henderson, the guy I just mentioned, he had an arrangement, an instrumental arrangement. I used portions of that in mine. And so it was a transition point at that point in the album to where then the song matter became much more flippant and less direct. I tried to divert people's from the problems, as it were. There's a song about the giant hole in the middle of Burlington called "The Big Hole," and then there's a song about at a certain point, towards the end of April, there was just like a litany of stuff. Of just like everything, and I think the final capper was, the murder hornets, and, like, okay, great, all right, wait a minute, asteroid coming, murder hornets, everything's going wrong, sounds like the end of the world. And so I wrote an end of the world song called Israfil, Come Blow Your Horn. And Israfil is an angel most people are not familiar with, but he's the actual horn blower when it's Day of Judgment. And basically, God's just got a hangover and wants to hear some good jazz, apparently. And I tried to basically come up with different things, some ways of entertaining people rather than just being, here's another song about the heavy, deep horror of our daily existence. Mm-hmm. And then finally, I was able to come up with, songs that are just flat out, a positive way of looking at the world. A song called "Grow," about the lessons you learn from growing plants. And it's really kind of a kid's song in a way. And then a song which I'll play in a little bit called "A Little Further Down the Road," which is grammatically incorrect, but still it sings better that way. And then the song, I finished the album with "The Lighthouse," which is a song, I've used the image of the lighthouse, literally the lighthouse that's here in Burlington, at the north end of the breakwater, that same lighthouse, I've used that image on all my albums. And there's I've always felt that it was a good metaphor for, for things like, trying to provide a light in the darkness, that kind of thing. But it's also, I realized, a metaphor for community. And so that's why, I chose it as the thing. It's one of the first, earliest buildings that people built as a community structure for the community good and for the good of other people who they didn't even know, just for the public common good. And so it's a good, it was a good metaphor for that song and for the album.
It sounds like the album itself was kind of a little bit like your journey through COVID, and I guess kind of everyone's journey through COVID, in the sense that, as you said, by April we almost felt overburdened by the amount of negative news that was coming out, that I think a lot of us kind of collectively checked out, started growing things in the garden, tried to look within ourselves a little bit more than looking out, while the world was kind of crumbling around us, and maybe also becoming a bit nihilistic and having some gallows humor at the same time. So, in terms of this album, and kind of your songwriting now, because you're very prolific. This is the third album in 3 years. What are you kind of writing about now? Where's your kind of going at this point?
Okay, so this album was released last August, so it's not brand new at all. But I mean, to me, it's because of COVID. Everything's in slow motion. So to me, this is the earliest promotion that I could, Well, I'll say this: there are songs that are left over there that didn't make the cut, like the COVID-19 blues, whatever, because everybody wrote one. It was pedestrian, whatever. There is a song on there that I wrote. A lot of the songs were trying to figure out, what do people feel? How do I express their feelings? Or how do I say something that people want to hear? That's also, it's sort of a responsibility of the audience, which is definitely why the positive songs are definitely, what would reassure people right now that people say, if you're going to do something positive, you might as well do that. But also, what are people's blues, as it were, to sing, and that sort of thing. And one of the songs I wrote, I'm considering it for the new album still, because it's one of the ones that's left over. It's a good song, but it could be misinterpreted. It could have been misinterpreted as an anti-mask song, because it has get up and go out kind of lyrics. And what I was aiming at was, people are. I started with the feeling of being trapped, and I thought, well, this is a metaphor for people's lives a lot. People are trapped in jobs, relationships, other things. So I wrote a song called Liberty, and it's a great little song. But I don't dare play it in public, because people could, the way the lyrics are written, take it on their own to say, this means I'm going to sing, I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm going to do what I want, but really it was about all these other things that we have that hold us back, rather than, like, you're trapped before COVID is really. And so if you really want to, if you really are ready to bust out, that was the name of that song. But it's a question of market whether to include it until the pandemic is fully over or not. So that's the kind of thing I was writing then. Since then, I mean, right before the album was, the album was finishing recording, and before the album was done, I wrote a song on July 4th. I always write a song on July 4th for some reason. I noticed that now. I'm not sure why that is, but it was, and it's funny, it was kind of prescient, and that's going to be on the album. And I think I'm going to do it with a ukulele or something like that. And it's called the Bigotry Blues. And, and it was all about, basically the rise of right-wing hatred and stuff like that. So that's what I was started to write about, really, is that kind of thing. Again, the themes, so I wrote the song Liberty, then I wrote a song called Responsibility, which sounds like it could be a terrible song, but it's, I haven't, I'm not sure of it yet, what I mean? So all those things go into the hopper. And then when I do a demo, finally, of all these, of everything I've collected over the past 6 months, which is happening in the next month or so, basically I start demoing things and then shopping around to the same people, asking them their opinion, and maybe others if they're interested. But these were the people who were interested, and getting their feedback. And it's an incredibly valuable process. I do a songwriter group here in Burlington, and sharing with others. And tomorrow night we're having a meeting online. If anybody's interested, check us out on Facebook, and find the event, and we'll be posting the link to the Zoom meeting, and you can come in and share a song, and get feedback and it's kind feedback, like, hey, this is what's good. Here's what I would want to hear more of. That phrase doesn't make sense. It's just a rhyme. Try, you could do better there. And you get valuable, honest feedback from people. So I think, honestly, that's one of the things as a songwriter that's been most important, is the community aspect of it. You can't, a lot of people think that they can just, magically, regurgitate a beautiful poem or a song or whatever, and have it just come out and it's perfect the way it is, and everything I do, and every single one is good. But no, I believe I mentioned this the last time I was on John Prine. Yeah, he wrote 10 songs a day in his office from 9 to 5, 50 songs a week, and out of that he said 1 or 2 were good. So, that's, you just got to remember, songwriting is mostly failing, is what I've discovered.
You kind of touched on something there that I'm definitely interested to explore a bit further. going now and having this Facebook group and meeting on Zoom, I feel like that's a way that a lot of us have kind of changed in this past year, and it's become very commonplace now to schedule a lot of things online, and that might be something we continue going forward because it's more convenient, it's more accessible for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Is the way you write your songs in this album, did it adapt, did it change comparison to your previous albums because of the pandemic, or you kind of kept your methods and your structure as is?
I kept my methods and structure, but oddly, I think the format benefits my style a lot. I did write a couple of quieter songs, but I've always, a few. But so I think it benefits. I think maybe I don't know if I didn't do anything conscious with regard to this will be better for online. But I did notice that when I did it online, when it was working correctly. Part of that is getting the technical aspect to work correctly. Like, don't go directly to YouTube. Or, there's various things you learn. And basically, when it's working, and Zoom has done an incredible job. I got to give them credit. In September, they rolled out high fidelity music modes, and all this stuff, mainly for teachers. But it's worked great for song circles and song shares and online little concerts and things. So you can use Zoom as your main interface, and the sound quality is very good. So what I'm presenting, which is typically something that requires people to either listen because it's quiet or concentrate on the lyrics. Seems to benefit from this format. There's interesting the way that technology can benefit certain things. TikTok this year had a sea shanty craze. We did, Rick Polari and I did a show on Folk Talk about the sea shanty craze, and we compared old and new versions and things like that. But the reason it came about is because the TikTok app, the duet feature, has a built-in latency, which makes call and response type songs ideal for it, whereas singing along the whole song wouldn't work as well. If somebody knows what's coming up, it works. So I expect work songs to come back or something, but done in Backstreet Boys style vocals, I guess is what it sounded. Because I got to admit it, I think it's a good thing for sea shanties to get a big shot in the arm from different types of singing. They don't sound like the old sea shanty singers at all. They're doing a new thing. And it's a good it's a good example of folk music actually working the way it's supposed to, continuity and tradition at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it would be great to listen to another song. So what have you got for us? Okay,
so this is still from the first half of the album, so nobody, get all depressed, okay? But I decided to write something a little more broad. And the guitar here, a couple of quick things. First, the guitar here that people can't see on the radio is I'm just going to say, advocate for it. It's a very ugly guitar, just to let you know what you're looking at, what you're not looking at. But it is a rescue guitar. This guitar was saved from being beaten to pulp by God knows who. It had been beaten up and had broken pieces on it, and I fixed it up. For the whole total cost on this guitar is $1846 or something like that. And then the tuning that this guitar is in is an odd little tuning. And it's a tuning I got contacting a fellow from New Zealand named Paul Ubana-Jones, who's actually a pretty world-famous folk singer. And I said, I just was like frustrated trying to learn a song off his album. And I wrote, well, what's this tuning, man? And I didn't expect him to write back. And he totally wrote a long thing back saying, here's the tuning. You should live with it for a while and try it in different, use the capo and try it in different things to get textures and write a bunch of songs with it. And I did. And 2 of the songs on my album came out of that. So thanks to Paul Ubana-Jones, I have this song. It's called We've Been Dark Ever Since.
Blaming on sickness, say that was the cause. Business was already dodgy, so we just closed our doors. We've been dark ever since. We've been dark ever since. We've been thinking about dead presidents. We've been dark ever since. It started well before that, when Tom got back from the war. The radios one by one fell silent. There were no jobs anymore. We've been dark ever since. We've been dark ever since. We've been thinking about dead presidents. We've been dark ever since. They shot the leaders of this country in the year that I was born. Shot Kennedy in '63, and to this day this country mourns. We've been dark ever since. We've been dark ever since. We've been thinking about dead presidents. We've been dark. We've been dark. We've been dark ever since.
We've been dark ever since by Jason Baker, off his new album, The Lighthouse, which came out in August of this year. Now I want to speak a little bit about the album you created with your mentor, Rick Polari, who we've had the pleasure of having on a few times. Folk Talk, A Guide to Traditional Folk Music, Volume 1, which certainly implies there might be a few more in the hopper.
It's an implied threat.
Tell us a little bit about how this got created. As you said already, you and Rick have your own radio show, so I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Well, yeah. So Rick and I do a radio show over at WBTV called Folk Talk, and it's on every week as we can. We over the course of the pandemic, it's become a lot more difficult to do them, just because we're doing it remotely, and so it's a bear, actually. He's pretty much, the show's concepts are his ideas, and I tend to be the technical person, which is why I was brought in. He started the show. His first show did not go well from a technical perspective. He had a real hard time. They had a great fun time with this guy, Andy Cohen, but they didn't get the recording, and he was very upset about all that. So he asked me, since he knew I was technically minded and interested in what he was doing, and I'd helped him with his Great Vermont Barn Dance live stream. When they clearly were having trouble, I jumped in and helped out. And he asked me to do this radio. What he did was said, come over to the radio, this media factory, and on Sunday. And then he said, how would you like to do a radio show? And I said, sounds cool. And he goes, okay, we're on in 20 minutes. And so then it actually worked. We did a double show. We did a show, and then we did a double show that we ended up pre-recording using his an interview with Pete Seeger and cutting shows in. So we actually had some experience doing this type of cut-in show, and that's the kind of shows we've been doing over the past years. He comes up with an interview or a stack of music, and then we talk about it a little bit, and then mix that all together, and that's all we've been able to do. So during that time, I'm learning all this kind of stuff about folk music and the folk music community and the history of it from him, because he's been in it. He knows the people. His mentors were Pete Seeger, Utah Phillips, Jimmy Driftwood. Like he knew all the real deal people and learned stuff from him, from them. And I've been trying to learn from him. So some of the songs he started teaching me. I had asked him to play. He appeared on Common Man Blues. Actually, he had come into the studio. And so some of the songs on Common Man Blues were, just live recordings of me playing like this. And then the other half, or 4 of the songs, were in a studio, and 2 of them had Rick and another friend, Janice, on it. And I had such a good time that I asked Rick, would you do an album with me? And I realized it would be expensive if we were trying to do covers of things, because, he actually had just done that with his album of Pete Seeger related maritime songs and how much it costs, especially to do a booklet. That apparently costs more than just doing the covers. But either way, you pay a lot of money. I thought, well, why don't we do actual folk songs? Just old-time folk songs, public domain songs. And so we actually did this. And we started in beginning of 2020, before the pandemic hit, and got like 2 days in the studio, and then everything shut down. And so it was like difficult. So he had to he had to go through a learning curve of learning how to do stuff at home himself. He now does a live stream that's broadcast on this radio station. He's really taken to it. So he was able to learn how to record at home, send me tracks of him playing the banjo, and I could record a vocal over it and add a guitar or not, or add in other words, we'd add bits and pieces to some songs, and some songs we left fairly simple, and we were able to finish an album that way. And so, the Volume 1 is definitely a threat that we're going to do more, because we had so many songs that we had to leave things off. We did make decisions to leave things off that we had initially talked about, because we realized there are some songs we should stop singing now. Like, we were going to do a song, and I looked up the history of the song, and it was a minstrel song. And then we thought about it, and we were like, no, we're not, although people sing it with what do you call it? With lyrics that have, that dull that and history of it, it's not worth it to me to jump into that question. So we actually had to make a lot of interesting decisions. Most of the songs are stuff he taught me, or that are part of his normal repertoire, and they're just really, classic songs like, John Henry. We do a good John Henry together, and Sourwood Mountain. I got to sing that. That was pretty cool, which is unusual, kind of not really from my background. And then for the last song, I chose something that was familiar from when I was a little kid, which is On Top of Old Smoky, which I even as a kid, I always liked the real version better than the spaghetti version, honestly. So, and also it's traditional for a folk band, an old time band to end on a waltz, and even on a waltz. So that was why that choice got made. But most of the other songs were things that he knew that he felt was important to impart to me. And that's what really the album is. The show and the album are essentially a dialogue. It's like you're looking into a dialogue between a mentor and his student, and that's truly what is happening. A lot of times I'm asking, well, what happened? Well, why did it happen that way, Rick? And it turns out that, and he'll tell a whole story about how Waterbury used to be, the center of country music in Vermont for many years, because of the radio station there used to have country music stars come down with their Nashville duds walking downtown or whatever, and things like that you never knew. I never knew that about Vermont, or just little bits of history about a song, what it meant. So John Henry, he taught me that, and he said, well, the first version I played with Pete Seeger, I learned it in C. I learned it in G. When he got to interview Pete, they played it together in G. Pete didn't really play it in G, but he did it. But Pete's just a generous guy, so he never said anything until later. He goes, by the way, I do that in C. And so then the next time they played it in C. But the last time he got to play with Pete, Pete was getting old. And he had changed a lot of songs to make it easier for him to play and sing. But he said, and this is my Pete Seeger, this is my version of Rick Polari's impression of Pete Seeger. Well, Rick, I've really gotten into boiling a song down to its very essence, and that's what I've done here. So I've moved John Henry down a half step to B flat, down a whole step to B flat, so I can sing it easier. But it's also a good blues key, and then it's got most of the changes are not, that people have all these chord changes. Most of them he removed them. There's just one chord change, and so the version is much simpler. But I gotta say, we did it that way. And so, it really works. It really works because it focuses on the story. Mm-hmm. And the melody is still intact. And so I felt that was really, that was an important thing for me to learn, not just a version of, not just, I can do the Bill Brunsey style version of John Henry, because that's what I learned when I was young. But learning, this is what Pete Seeger decided was the essence of the song. That was a cool thing just in and of itself to know, let alone to share with everybody on an album. So that was the cool part about it.
One question I've asked a couple of folk musicians actually, and you kind of just brought something up that reminded me. But what do you feel it is about folk music? And I guess what does Rick feel it is about folk music that draws so many storytellers? Why is folk the medium of storytelling in songs, or why is it seen as traditionally the medium of storytelling in songs? Why not something else?
The tradition part of it is ballads. Ballads are story songs by definition. In fact, a lot of people think ballads are just slow songs with nice melodies, but there's a lot of people who write modern songs that are slow, and they don't really tell a story precisely. They're a lot more abstract. So, you might say, well, this Billy Joel song is about, but it's not really. It's actually it's actually a personal, like, introspective song, and that's different. It's the ballad tradition that, in terms of why is it a tradition, I think it actually is in everything. Honestly, I think most music, the best songs do tell stories, and Pete Seeger was always saying that. And in fact, one of my favorite Pete Seeger songs, there's a book, and it has his criticism of his own song. Oh, this song is really kind of an editorial, really, and I could have done better. It'd be better if this was a story. But it's a song called "Letter to Eve," and it's a brilliant song about peace, about wishing people peace on earth, and between, and so I don't know, I don't know the answer to the people like stories, I guess, is the best way to do it. As far as folk music being the medium, I don't know that it isn't. I think all music is folk music, though. That's the thing, I guess, unless it's, at a certain point, unless it's seriously formalized in the sense of classical music and you can't play it another way. And even then, classical music has all kinds of things in it that are hidden underneath it. Oh, well, that makes it different. Different orchestras, the Ormandy version versus a much more modern thing is going to sound different because of the tones they like or whatever. But also stuff like, they just mark something continuo bass, and the person's supposed to know what to do. That's improvisation. That leaves room for interpretation. So all music is interpreted by people. And as I think Leadbelly said, well, it's folk music because I don't see no cows playing it. And so, if it's played by people, it's folk music. It's in a sense, rock and roll is nothing but a marketing term for doo-wop vocal music, which arose out of the one tradition, and rockabilly, which arose out of a different tradition. And they merge there only as a marketing strategy. Country music, rock and roll, folk. There was no Grammy category for any of those before 1958. They were all created in 58 and 59. All of those categories did not exist before then. There was no such thing as country music. It was called hillbilly music. There was no such thing as rock and roll. It was called R&B or race music, race records. And so rock and roll and all those things, and even folk. Folk was created to differentiate certain things and say, this is separate. This is not country music. Even though Woody Guthrie, as Marty Stewart would say, as he said in the country music show, Woody Guthrie's as country as can be, but he's folk music because of the political content. They wish to. A lot of those labels are to separate people by race. Specifically, this is what's safe to buy. They tried to make rock and roll into Pat Boone's version of Little Richard and stuff like that. They really put that out and tried, but kids, some people just wanted to buy the authentic deal of R&B. From people who were black. And, so the record company figured out, well, we got to make money somehow. And that was Elvis, of course. Mm-hmm. That was the classic. If I could find me a white guy who can sing like a black man, I'll make $1 million. Well, they made way, way more than $1 million. Elvis is the biggest thing in the world for a long time. And that was, so they weren't wrong in terms of the popularity of the music. But it shows that the political atmosphere in which they're selling stuff, the capitalist, they had to do it in a way that didn't disrupt things too much. Mm-hmm. So folk music, Kingston Trio was the first folk Grammy ever, and the category was created for them so that they didn't win something else. Mm-hmm. And essentially it kicked off the folk revival of the 60s, as many people call it, or as some people who were actual traditional folk traditionalists call it, the folk scare of the 60s. That's what they call that sometimes. But that's, folk music is any music that people are playing, is my opinion. And plenty of classical music composers used, they even acknowledge it. This folk melody, this is a folk melody, and I used it and I made a classical composition out of it. Anytime you take a song, at this point, all folk music means is music that is, in one sense, all it means is music that is not copyrighted anymore. Mm-hmm. So, if something is younger than 70, whatever, the whole, whatever the amount of years it is, and doesn't isn't copyrighted, then it's folk music too, because everybody sings it. It's a folk song. That's, I guess, maybe it's so hard to come up with a definition of all that. But and people have tried and tried. But to me, if people sing it, it's folk music because they're people, because they're folks.
Interesting. Thank you for telling me about that. By the way, that's definitely something I didn't really know about. So I always appreciate learning new things. Well, we've not got too much time left, but I do want you to be able to promote what you can promote and tell us where we can find your music, and maybe tell us a little bit if you are going to be doing any shows in the near future now you've been vaccinated.
Yeah, I've got my first shot. Well, let's start with promoting. So the album The Lighthouse is out, and so is Folk Talk, A Guide to Traditional Folk Music, Volume 1, with that really important. But if you just look up Folk Talk, A Guide, and it's hard to say Folk Talk. You don't want to say it too fast for obvious reasons. Folk Talk. So we say it. And see you next week on Folk Talk. But yeah, try that album out, and those things are available anywhere you normally stream music. So rather than name the platforms, you know where you can stream music. Wherever you stream music, you can find me, Jason Baker, The Lighthouse, or Common Man Blues, or if you're really adventurous, America Dreams is still out there, and they're all available online. America Dreams is only online. I do have CDs. If people want to contact me, you can my email is jason@jbakervt.com. jbakervt.com is my website. JBAKERVT, J for Jason, VT for Vermont, obviously, .com. And that's where you can find most of my stuff. I'm going to be playing my first outdoor gig since September at a backyard party location as yet undisclosed, that someone's trying to come up with a house party, a house concert type venue in their backyard, so social distancing can still be in effect. That'll be on the 23rd. So if folks want to check it out on Facebook, again, J Baker VT is where you find me on everything. And then the only other things I have set up in terms of actual shows, because everything's so unsure, is some outdoor shows at the Vermont State Parks. Now, which order am I going to say? I'm pretty sure in June I'm playing at Elmore State Park. I'm pretty sure I'm playing Button Bay in July, and then Grand Isle State Park in August. And those will be towards basically a Saturday Saturday during the beginning of each of those months. So that's where I'll be playing.
Grand Isle State Park in August is a great place to play.
I picked those three parks because they're the best three parks around for a day trip, if you will. And so I'm like, these are just, heck, I'll get to go to the park I like, play some music for people, maybe, sell a few CDs or whatever, but that's about it, and the main thing is if there's a problem with COVID still, we're canceling it, obviously. Mm-hmm. They will cancel it. I assume I would, if it looks like gathering people together is still a bad idea. I think I'm not expecting a horde, let's just put it that way, to come and listen to me. So if it's a small gathering, I'm nervous about July 4th and stuff like that. So we'll see. We have to, we've come to a point in this world where we have to reiterate our and recalculate every day. Where we are at, what's going on, what's going to happen. So,
well, best of luck, and I do hope you do get to play those days and those places. So what song have you got to play us out with?
Well, as I mentioned, banging the mic around, as I mentioned, my friend Tom Smith gave me feedback about the album, saying, hey, are you going to write any, by the way, these are great, are you going to write any uplifting material for the album? I gotta tune that, sorry. And I wrote this song, which is, I admit it's grammatically incorrect to say further, a little further down the road, but it sings so much better than farther. So this is an attempt at, again, reassuring people now. So this would be a message I hoped people wanted to hear. It's called A Little Further Down the Road. No one knows what comes next.
Guessing is uncertain. Can't look behind the curtain. Answers lie around the bend, although the questions never end. There is a sign you will decode. A little further down the road. A little further down the road. Things don't change on their own. Gotta push, that much is known. And if we push together, it all could be much better. Answers lie around the bend, although the questions never end. We can move that heavy load. A little further down the road. A little further down the road. Memories are all we've got. Missing everyone a lot. But nothing lasts forever, and we will be together. Answers lie around the bend, although the questions never end. Maybe we return the love we showed. A little further down the road, we will be together. A little further down the road, we will be together. A little further down the road, we will be together. A little further down the road.
Jason Baker, thank you so much for coming in. That has been a really great pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me again on RocketShop.
Oh, no worries. Well, that's all we've got time for tonight. Tune in next week. We've got Cameron Clark coming in, so it's going to be a good show. But for now, this has been 105.9 The Radiator, The Rocket Shop. I've been your host, Tom Proctor, and good night.